For those that are joining for the first time, my name is Jason Swan. I'm based here in Portugal, down in the south, where it is slightly warmer, more often than not. As I say, it is raining at this moment in time and has been all week. I kid you not, there is a bucket on my desk right now collecting raindrops, embarrassingly enough, because it has been literally torrential weather all week. And as soon as there's one little drop of rain in Portugal, everything seems to break. Cars crash, buildings slide, and it's just chaos. So unfortunately, our office has felt the pinch there as well. But anyway, enough about the plumbing issues. As I'm down here in Portugal. I'm the senior partner for Holborn Assets in Portugal and Holborn Assets Spain as well. I've been in Portugal myself for around 5 years now. Previous to Portugal, I was in Spain for, again, about 5 years. Still really struggling learning the language. I'm just as good at Portuguese as I am at Spanish, which is terrible. Fortunately, I'm still pretty well versed in English, thankfully. But I'm also a qualified financial planner. I spend a lot of my time talking to expats about kind of structuring their income and their assets and their taxation in line with becoming tax resident in Europe. However, over the past couple of years in particular, I spend the majority of my time now covering off everything that you need to know about Portugal's Golden Visa. But any questions that you have on any of the above, any money questions, any visa questions, or just questions generally around living in Portugal, I can hopefully add some value. If you do want to check out the website as well, you can do so, as you can see there on the screen. Now, as far as what we do, the service that is on offer is very much an all-encompassing one-stop shop to help our clients achieve residency or citizenship in different parts of the world. Of course, this evening we're going to cover off Portugal, but yeah, there are many programs that we are able to assist with all over the world, and we provide everything that you need, really, to focus just on making sure that you've bought some sun cream and you are prepared to enjoy Portugal, because we take care of everything else that's needed to get you the permission to live in Portugal. And that includes, of course, things like setting up tax numbers, which is the first thing that we'll need. Setting up your Portuguese bank account is number two. Collecting all the documents that we need for your visa application, things like marriage certificates, birth certificates, passport copies, proof of address, clearance certificates from the FBI or from the police. There'll be some apostille things that need to be stamped before you can submit them. There'll be need to do some translation before we can submit documents as well. And what else do we do? We also provide, of course, the legal work that is necessary to be able to submit your application to AIMA. And we do hold your hand right throughout the process up until when you receive your visa, and of course moving through to when you get a passport further down the line, if of course you would like to move towards getting citizenship. We'll also be there to accompany you on the day with your biometrics, which is the first time at which you need to physically travel to Portugal as part of the process. And it will, I can almost guarantee, be the most boring day of your holiday when you do need to go and see AIMA and do your fingerprints and your photo. However, we'll be there to accompany you to keep you entertained as best as we can, but also to ensure that you are fully prepared and that you don't forget any documents and make a wasted trip. But yeah, if you get a chance, please type my name into Google, have a look at the company, check out the website. You'll see lots of client reviews as well through Trustpilot. And of course, any questions on that, feel free to ask. So that's who we are. As I mentioned before, Portugal is by far the most popular program that we offer. It is very much seen as the gateway to Europe, but there are other European programs available if you're not necessarily set on Portugal. Maybe you're just thinking of moving country, or maybe just changing tax status, perhaps. But yeah, any other programs that you wish to discuss, feel free to reach out and be happy to talk you through those as well. But for, of course, today, we're going to stay on my personal favorite, being that of Portugal. So let me bring you up to speed on the latest news of Portugal. The Portugal program, as well, It's actually been okay recently. There's not been a lot of changes. 2023, there was a raft of changes. The government immigration office changed from SEF to AMA. The law changed, whereas property investment was removed from the criteria in 2023. Last year, the 5-year clock to citizenship now begins to tick from when you apply for the visa rather than when you receive the visa as well. We've also seen different changes and improvements made with the process. Some of the headlines that have come up in March are of a similar theme. A lot of talk around processing times for the Golden Visa at the moment. Certainly since the election in November, we've seen over a 300% increase in applications for Portugal, which is great for the country. And but of course, it can also have a negative impact as well. But the Golden Visa program is quite infamous for delays in processing times. However, the government now has really kind of set their sights on improving the process, which is great to see. As I say, that started last year when the law changed from when you receive your passport. Again, that starts now from when you apply for the visa rather than when you receive the visa, meaning that it's a maximum of 5 years to apply for the passport. And of course, the staffing levels were increased. They were doubled by AMA at the end of last year. I think another a couple. Well, I think another 300 staff were taken on across Portugal in January. And of course, there is a special task force now that has been set by the government. Sounds a little bit like the A-team, right? But it is actually a special task force assigned by the Council of Ministers to clear all pending applications by the 2nd of June this year. So we'll see how that goes, but all signs are positive at this point. Again, it's a lot of talk around, of course, Americans now heading towards Portugal, which has been the case for quite some time. I'd say American citizens coming to Portugal have accounted for maybe 70 or 80% of applications over the past few years. But yeah, it's even more so now since the election in November. There has been a significant uplift, not necessarily for people moving to Portugal right now, but I hear a lot about more of kind of planning for the future, a bit of a plan B, kind of a just in case backup option, ultimately to basically safeguard against what may happen in the future, whether that is for political reasons or it might be for family reasons, or as always, thinking of retirement and whether or not Portugal or Europe is the way to go. But yeah, all in all, no, there's no bad news at the moment. I feel like I've not given any bad news for a while. 2023 was always bad news. I was kind of a real cynic every time we did the updates, but not a cynic, but just the bearer of bad news. But at the moment, yeah, it is very popular. There are more applications than ever, but there is now more support than ever from the government as well to maintain and improve, of course, the processing times. So yeah, other than that, that's where we're at. Otherwise, it is business as usual. So let's start with, in fact, no, my apologies. Let's take a step back. So if you have your phones handy, coming into the 21st century now, you can join for all the latest news on the Golden Visa program, the WhatsApp channel now for free of charge. And myself and some other key professionals within the industry will be doing our very best to provide relevant and interesting and important information that you may need to be aware of or want to be aware of with regard to the Golden Visa program. That includes, where we can, any law changes which may affect any upcoming or pending applications. Of course, I'll always share any new investment options that are published as early as possible. As far as kind of legal commentary against some top law firms within Portugal, trying their best to keep you up to date on the legal processes, also commentary from fund managers, and yeah, any other important information that we can share, we shall do so to ensure that you remain fully up to date this year with the ever-changing Golden Visa program. Okay, so let's jump in. So if you are just at the beginning of your Golden Visa journey, allow me to explain exactly what a Golden Visa is. And yeah, we'll start with the basics. So the Golden Visa is effectively a VIP pass to live or work or simply sunbathe for as long as you like in Portugal. It's a 2-year visa, and you can renew the visa every 2 years for as long as you like. And after 5 years has passed, you can apply for a European passport or Portuguese passport. And when you have a European passport, you can then live in any European country you like without any restrictions. So it is effectively, it's kind of like getting 27 passports all at the same time. So yeah, even if you're not necessarily planning to move to Portugal, it still gets you on the path to getting the passport, and then you can choose any European country later down the line. The part that stands out about the Portuguese program compared to the likes of Spain and the likes of Greece and other European programs is that there isn't really a minimum stay of such. Most residency programs require you to spend at least 6 months of the year in the country. However, with the Golden Visa, the minimum stay is only 2 weeks every 2 years, which means that you don't actually have to move country, and you can still get a passport um, for later in life, but you can stay exactly where you are. And as long as you're able to fulfill that horrible task of coming for a holiday in Portugal, at least for 2 weeks every 2 years, that will be all you need to do. Well, that's the only stay that you need to do to get the passport. The important part there is that you don't need to become tax resident as well. So your taxes, your residency stays exactly where it is, but you can still be on the path to citizenship later down the line. There's only Portugal and Malta that will allow a European passport without that minimum 6 month stay each year. The difference with Malta, however, is that you need over €1 million to get the passport. It can be a lot faster. Well, it is a lot faster to get a Maltese passport. We can do that in about 18 months, but a significantly higher amount of capital is needed. So unless you can't wait for the Portugal program, there isn't really a huge justification to go the Maltese route, unless, of course, you want to live in Malta or you need a passport very, very fast. Failing that, the Portugal program has the lowest entry point. You can do it with as little as €168,000 as of today's date. And as we said, we can apply for a passport after 5 years from applying for your visa. So yeah, it has been around for quite some time. It's been around since 2012 now. There's been tens of thousands of applications submitted, and it is very much tried and tested. There is a clear path to citizenship, unlike some other programs in Europe, which have not, are quite new programs, which perhaps haven't been kind of proven to get towards citizenship just yet. But yeah, that's it. That is Portugal. Yeah, popular because of like I said, there's very little minimum stay, and the entry requirements are very low as well as far as capital to be invested. So hopefully that's nice and clear. Again, please do drop in any questions as we go. If I do miss anything, I'm going to give a relatively quick overview as we fly through. So apologies if I go too fast, but hopefully that's okay so far. As a Golden Visa holder, of course, you will benefit from not just being able to see me, but there are other perks as well, would you believe? And you can, of course, spend as much time as you like in Portugal, but more importantly, visa holders will get access to study in Portugal if you wish. That applies to all the family as well, if you wish to have access to European education. Also, you'll have access to healthcare as well. So often, the access to education can be great for children. Access to healthcare can be more important for adults, especially older adults as well. Portugal has the fourth best healthcare system in the world, would you believe? Although my experience with the healthcare wasn't fantastic. I went to register at the hospital a couple of weeks back, and it was very difficult. But I don't know. I don't think you can expect a VIP service with the public healthcare, but nonetheless, it is the fourth best healthcare system in the world. So it's a nice perk to have, and of course, compared to some countries, whereas the healthcare can be very expensive, that in itself often is a reason to apply for the visa. There are some tax perks as well for new residents. There is the introduction of NHR 2.0 as well, which under certain circumstances can allow new residents to have a zero rate of tax in Portugal on certain overseas income. There is a certain qualifying criteria, and it's only relevant for when you actually become tax resident in Portugal as well, which means spending over 6 months of the year in Portugal. But before that time, if you're not here for 6 months of the year, you don't pay tax in Portugal anyway. For reference, unlike the States, Portugal doesn't tax its citizens. It only taxes its residents, which means that you can have a golden visa and you can have a passport, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you are tax resident. That is decided by, as I mentioned, spending over 6 months of the year here in Portugal. But otherwise, yeah, and of course, any questions on the tax topics, I will be happy to put my financial advisor hat back on and happy to talk through any questions on that on a one-to-one basis. But for now, yeah, lots up for grabs and many reasons why the Portugal program remains the #1 choice for Europe. So moving on, not that I'm sure everyone needs a geography lesson, but just in case you haven't been to Portugal, which strangely is quite common actually. So I do speak to so many people that happy to invest, want to get a passport, but have never even been to Portugal. But just for reference, this is the very small country of Portugal. I'm down here in the south, in the Algarve, in a little town called Albufeira. I'm slightly biased, but I think it's the best part of Portugal. Personally, I think it's actually the best place in the world to live, seeing as you asked. But that that is just because it is quite a nice. It's a very relaxed part of Portugal. It's a nice contrast to a very busy professional life, but it can be very quiet. It pretty much closes down for the winter months. The capital, of course, in Lisbon is a much more cosmopolitan for the kind of young professionals, generally speaking, and for those that are still working. Lisbon offers the most opportunities, and of course is the capital of Portugal. And the third hotspot is right in the top of Portugal in Porto, which is a bit of a mix of the two. I think not quite as busy as Lisbon, but a little bit more relaxed. And yeah, many clients that choose just to live in the middle of nowhere as well, maybe on a nice winery or with some nice farmland perhaps. But yeah, plenty of green parts of Portugal to choose from. And just remember that the Golden Visa doesn't require you to have an address in Portugal. You don't need to. Again, you don't need to live here. You don't need to have an address here. You don't need to decide even where you're going to move, should you move in the future. The Golden Visa is not specific to a particular address. It is simply a permission to travel and stay in Portugal. So if you are looking to move to Portugal, then yeah, my advice is to spend some time here, travel around, see where you fancy. I actually ended up somewhere completely different to where I was expecting. And yeah, having seen all of Portugal, I finally decided to settle in Albufeira, where yeah, I bought my home and settled with my family a few years back now. But there you go, a little geography lesson. I actually failed geography. Well, I didn't fail geography. I did pass geography, but I got a very average score in school. I was very good at maths and English. I was the star pupil, but not so much geography. Anyway, so as of today's date, this is the criteria for how you can qualify for a visa, and there are formally 5 routes to the visa. And the first is you can create jobs. If you wish, you can set up a business in Portugal, or you can expand your business into Portugal and create 10 jobs. It's not the kind of thing you'd probably do just to get the visa, but if you do have an existing business, that may be something of interest. You can make a donation to the government. You can donate 500,000, or you can donate 250,000 if you're feeling generous. And the fourth option is to invest into some kind of investment fund, venture capital fund, or on the basis that the fund meets a certain criteria that is set by the government. Or the option 5 is to invest directly into a Portuguese company that will create or maintain a certain number of jobs as a result of your investment. The vast majority of applications are going into some form of investment fund or some form of investment, whereas you don't need to create a business and that you don't give away, 250 or 500,000 euros. But in the main, clients generally like the idea of keeping their money and, where possible, to make some money on their investment as well, without, of course, the hands-on required for managing a business. So, but there you go. There are the 5 routes. Property investment was removed from the criteria back at the end of 2023 when the program very nearly closed, actually. The Golden Visa program, came to as a photo finish, actually. But in November 2023, the government decided to not close the program and simply remove property as one of the options to try and curb the rapidly increasing house prices. Unfortunately, didn't have too much of an effect. Which was pretty obvious in my opinion, because Golden Visa applications equated for about 0.05% of property transactions at the time. But hey, I'm not in charge of Portugal, but yeah, it's had no impact of property prices. They continue to increase, and the average now property prices has gone up by 8.8% every year for the past 10 years, to be precise. And it still continues, but hey. Anyway, so the capital that's required. So I just mentioned that you have the option of a donation from 250,000 or an investment of 500,000. Now there are some variations to those routes, if you will, and as around about maybe 6 months back, we've seen a huge uplift in applications for the option to finance an investment. Now, this is something that is still a cost. It's not an investment. However, compared to donating 250,000 euros, you have the option to pay 168,000 euros, which allows you to borrow 500,000 euros for a term of 7 years. And that money is then invested into an investment fund, and the risk is taken on by the lender. So it is, for all intents and purposes, another form of donation, however, with a significantly lower amount of capital required. And also on the investment front, again, to clarify, 500,000 is the minimum capital required for any type of qualifying investment. However, there are 1 or 2 out there as of today's date which pay an upfront return instead of an annual interest. And in particular, the ones that are still available pay an upfront return of 101,000 euros, which can actually be used towards the 500,000 euros to be invested. And there is also a loan facility of 50,000 as well, which means that investors can qualify with a profitable investment of 349,000 of their own capital. So yeah, there are 1 or 2 variations, but in the main, like I said, the donation is 250 and all investments must be 500,000 euros. As far as who qualifies for the Golden Visa, as long as you don't already have a European passport, and if you do already have a European passport, you're probably on the wrong webinar, because you wouldn't need the Golden Visa because you already have access to Europe. But that is a rule nonetheless. Also, you must have a clean criminal record. Hopefully not too many people log out when I say that. But yeah, clean criminal record. And of course, you need to make an eligible investment in line with the criteria set by the government. You must, of course, stay in Portugal for at least 14 days every 2 years, as we mentioned before. However, there are no other requirements. You don't need to be in Portugal all the time. There isn't any age restrictions. You don't need to prove any income. You don't have to have anything else. That's it. As long as you tick those 4 points, you are good to go. And just to, again, I know maybe sound like a bit of a broken record on this point, but it's a question that always comes up. But the big difference when considering the Golden Visa to the other residency visas like the D7 and the D8 is the fact that you don't have to become tax resident in Portugal. all other visa routes require you to be in the country for at least 6 months per year, in some cases over 8 months per year. But like I said, the Golden Visa is for those that don't necessarily want to live in Portugal right now or can't commit to living in Portugal for 5 years to get the passport. And again, it reduces that requirement down to just 2 weeks every 2 years. And then again, 5 years down the line, you can apply for your passport and then you have permanent rights to pick any European country you like. So there you go. What have we got next? Family members. Okay, so the way this works is you have one main applicant, and the main applicant can add their family members as long as they are classed as a dependent. And dependents can be either a spouse, married or unmarried is fine, as long as we can prove you live at the same address. Children can be included up to the age of 21 without any proof of dependency required. If your children are above the age of 21, they may still be added. However, we will need to prove some kind of dependency. And we can do that often by providing proof that they are enrolled in some form of further education, or of course, financially dependent in some way. What we also do sometimes is kind of change who is the main applicant as well. So depending on everyone's ages, sometimes it makes sense to add one of the children as the main applicant, and they have you or their parents as their dependents, because parents can be included above the age of 65, again, without any proof of dependency being required. So again, when we speak on a one-to-one basis, I'll go through some questions, and once we've found out, who you'd like to be included, we can make a plan of action as to how to structure the application. But you can't include brothers or sisters. You cannot include colleagues, friends, pets. Pets come for free, actually. You don't need to put them on the visa. Pets don't need one. But otherwise, it's just parents and children can be added. And of course, all must follow the same rules. All need to have a clean criminal record. All need to visit Portugal. All will need to do the biometrics. And all will need to learn Portuguese if they would like to apply for the passport as well. Okay, so bit of a busy slide, but overall, this just gives you a rundown of what happens behind the scenes. Now, myself and my team will be here to facilitate all of the process. We try and make it as easy as we can, but there are a lot of things involved between point A and point B of receiving the visa. And as a general overview, step number one, if this is something of interest, is to schedule some time and we'll talk through your circumstances. We can go through the process. We can look at different investment options that are currently available. And we can look at the different costs involved with things like the government fees and the legal fees and things like this. Once you have selected an investment for the application, the first thing that we will do is then apply for your Portuguese tax numbers. We'll then set up your bank account in Portugal. We'll gather all the documents that we need for your application. And then in around about 8 to 12 weeks later, everything will be ready to go. You'll transfer the funds to your new Portuguese bank account, and then we will submit your application. Okay, to AIM. And it's from that day that the 5-year clock will begin to tick to applying for your passport. But all of this is done remotely. We then just wait for the biometrics appointment, which will be the first time that you need to travel to Portugal. Again, you'll be accompanied by a member of the team to make sure it all goes smoothly on the day. And then, yeah, shortly after, we'll receive the card for your visa, and then you have access to live in Portugal. So yeah, that's all that happens. Like I said, don't worry too much about all this. This is what we manage. There are different parties involved. There will be a bank manager, there'll be the tax office, there'll be an accountancy firm for your tax declarations, there will be an investment manager for your chosen investment, there will be the biometrics office, they'll be dealing with AIMA, etc., etc. But you have myself effectively as the project manager, and you have my team here at Holborn to, like I say, simply keep you up to date as things progress and let you know what's needed and when it's needed to get you there as quick as we can. So there you go. That is the process. Piece of cake. It's not a piece of cake. But, yeah, we try and do the majority as best as we can for you. Okay, so yeah, as a pathway to citizenship, before we then go on to some more specifics on the investment front, this is the timeline should you wish to go towards passports. As I mentioned before, it will take us around 8 to 12 weeks to be able to submit your application on the basis that everything's been set up, the investment's been made, and we then proceed to submit online. It will take, again, a little bit of a grey area this at the moment as to realistically how long you should expect to wait for the visa. I would budget you at around about 12 months at this point in time to receive the visas in hand, in light of, like I said, the recent news and the focus that the government now has on reducing processing times. Hopefully, we will see that get even faster. And the Golden Visa will last for 2 years. So at the end of those 2 years, which will be around about 3 years from now, we do the first renewal. Another 2 years from then, we'll do the second renewal. Around that same time, we will apply for your passports on the basis that you have learnt some Portuguese and you've kept a clean criminal record. And yeah, you do need to pass an A2 language test at some point during that time if you wish to apply for your passport. Clients generally split between some kind of taking on a tutor and kind of doing a crash course to pass the test within about 3 months. Others gradually learning over that, that 5-year period. But yeah, at some point you've got to do a test. There is a backup option, little secret here to tell everyone, but there is a way that you don't have to do a test. There is a way that you can evidence a minimum amount of study. And if you do 150 hours study, you can get away with having to do a test. However, it is more expensive, and it works out, it is around about €5,000 per person to do that option. But it's there as a backup, just in case you're struggling to pass the test. But for any questions on that, naturally, we'll cover that off in one-to-one meetings. But otherwise, yeah, if you tick those boxes, we'll apply for the passport, and then mission complete. You will have the fourth best passport in the world, which is a statistic based on the benefits that you get from that passport, really, and the main one being the freedom to travel. And this is something that us Brits and other first world countries take for granted, that you first of all get access to travel visa-free to over 190 countries. Now, certain nationalities already have that luxury. But for some that'll be listening in right now, you might find that you're having to fill out visa application forms every time that you want to travel. But as soon as you have that European passport, there is no more visas required for 190 countries globally. And for everyone listening in at the moment, it is, of course, the option to live in any European country at that time without any restrictions and no further investment requirements. So there you go. Hopefully that all makes sense. So thank you for all your questions. Got a lot of questions going on, so thank you for submitting. What I'll do before we jump into those, I'm just going to run through a few more slides. We're not doing too bad for time, but shortly we'll come into the Q&A and have a chance to run through all of the questions. And I think my laptop is about to die. That's quite embarrassing, isn't it? So if you can spare me for 2 moments, we'll have a quick ad break, and I'll be back with you momentarily. Sorry about that. I'm back. So yeah, hope that's okay so far. So that is the overall program itself. I'm now going to go into a bit more specifics around, like I say, how to qualify for this program, and then we'll jump onto the Q&A and make sure we cover everything off. So let's fire on through. So first, you don't really need any commentary from me, I suppose, around donations or setting up a business. If you do want to qualify through those routes, please drop me an email, and simply that'll be a case of really just speaking with the attorneys, and they'll help you structure the business and or, of course, talk you through the donation process. For me, I'm going to focus this evening on the investment routes and how you can qualify by way of not having to manage a business or by gifting away a large sum of capital. Although there is the financing option, which we'll cover shortly as well. So first of all, if you do choose to qualify through some form of investment or venture capital fund, there are some rules that the fund must abide by. There are tens of thousands of funds available in the universe to invest into, but there's only a very small list of funds that meet the criteria set by the Portuguese government. Now, first of all, for the fund to qualify, it has to be approved and regulated in Portugal by the CMVM, which is the Portuguese Securities Commission, if you will, kind of the FCA equivalent for the UK. And the fund may not, as of 2023, directly or indirectly invest into any kind of real estate. The fund must invest at least 60% of its capital into Portugal as well. So, for example, you couldn't have a Portuguese fund that invests into the UK stock market, and likewise, you couldn't have a US fund that invests into the Portuguese stock market. It's got to be a Portuguese fund that invests into Portugal itself. And the minimum subscription, of course, is 500,000 euros that we've talked about before. And although not a kind of a hard and fast rule, best practice is to ensure that you can remain invested in the fund until you physically receive the passport. Just note that any breaks in the investment may invalidate a visa renewal. And just in case of any delays getting the passport, it's important that we can do a renewal further in the process, because you'll need to have a valid visa to apply for your passport. So yeah, you don't want to be investing into something that matures after 2 years, for example, and leaves you with a break during the visa period. Likewise, you don't want to be investing into something that ties up the money for 10 to 15 years, because you're not going to need to be invested in line with these rules for that long. But that's it. As long as the fund meets that, you can invest with any fund manager, any sector. It's just that those rules to abide by to qualify for the visa. These are just some general tips. They're quite obvious, but if you are doing your own research, just be mindful of a few things. I often say that Portugal probably isn't the first country that you would think of investing into if you wasn't considering, of course, applying for the Golden Visa. There are different investments to choose from, of course, that range in shapes and size. But the Portuguese financial system isn't quite as robust, you may say, as the likes of the US or the UK. It has come on a very long way, and there's no kind of immediate concerns as such. The financial system is well regulated. However, it's always important to ensure that you have a clear understanding of the security that you have for your capital. And where you can, try and find an investment that has some form of asset-backed security as well. But we'll talk about more about that shortly. Be mindful of how long the capital is tied up for. Again, you'll likely only need to be invested for six or so years, so you don't want to lock yourself into any investments with. Well, there are some funds that will tie the capital up for as long as 14 years. And unless you want to be bound by those rules for longer than you need to be, try and make sure that you've always got access to withdraw that capital as soon as you decide to. Be mindful of fees. Portuguese funds can notoriously be quite expensive. Be clear on entry, management, performance, and exit fees. I personally don't mind paying fees, however, only if they are justified. In a lot of cases, the costs are not justified, but make sure you fully understand the costs of the investment. understand how the returns work. Is it got a guaranteed return? Is it performance-based? Is there a track record? And just overall, just be mindful, just be clear on what the investment risk is. If you are from the US as well, the US is quite unique because you will have the reporting requirements back to the US as part of factor for any overseas investments that you hold. Not all investment funds are factor compliant and can be difficult when it comes to tax time each year. And where you can, ask for any incentives as well. There are different investments out there that may offer, free legal fees, for example, or a complimentary stay in Portugal, perhaps. So there can be some perks to be had, but just have your brain in full gear when you're doing your own research. I've been sent investments from that clients have seen of all strange, wonderful, and in some cases, weird and wonderful cases. But I'm always happy to make sure you have key information. We can download all the key facts of any qualifying and regulated investments and ensure you are fully informed to help you decide, which is the best option. Otherwise, like I said before, you can invest in any sector. There's no restrictions on the type of investment that you have. These are some of the more prominent sectors in Portugal. You'll hear me often talk about the tourism and hospitality sectors. Portugal registered for the first time in its history 31 million visits to the country last year. So the tourism industry is at an all-time high, and closely linked with tourism is, of course, hospitality. So yeah, you'll hear me often talk about those sectors, but it doesn't. Yeah, there's no restrictions on how you invest. It's just those rules that we talked about before to qualify for the visa. Perhaps you fancy investing into a nice winery or some renewable energy, perhaps. But yeah, there you go. So to finish up, and then we'll jump onto the Q&A. Like I said, all funds, we are not tied to any particular fund managers. We are here to ensure that you have a successful visa application and path towards citizenship. Our main concern, above all else, is always security for capital. We're not here to make lots and lots of money. We're here to have maximum capital security and to get a successful visa. But these are some of the more prominently known fund managers in Portugal right now. Again, happy to give you access to the fund directory. We can download information on any investment fund that qualifies for the program during one-to-one discussions. So if you'd like to do that, again, feel free to drop me an email. But to give you an idea, the funds, like I said, they all vary. You can invest in very low risk funds. There are exceptionally high risk funds. Generally speaking, the returns are in line with the appetite for risk that you wish to take. And there's, some of the more adventurous funds will target over 15% per year. Fixed investments, you'd expect around 4% per year. I mentioned before, it is sometimes possible to have some form of asset-backed security as well, which is always a good to have. Minimum capital required for a profitable investment is 349,000, and the minimum capital for a non-refundable fee is 168,000. So there you go. Super bird's eye view on investment funds. I'm going to give you a few examples, and then we will jump on to the questions. I've been patiently waiting, so thank you for that. So I would say fair that the majority of the people I speak to, they kind of find it stressful enough sending €500,000 to a foreign country and moving country without the added stress of tracking the Portuguese stock market or what it may be. So quite often, more often than not, a fixed return is commonly requested, and you know exactly what's going in, you know exactly what's going to come out later on. And one example of a fixed investment is to invest into a qualifying fund that invests into 4 key sectors, split between hospitality, healthcare, technology, and food retail. It pays an upfront return of €101,000, which is effectively 6 years return, all paid upfront. So there's no annual returns, but there's just one lump sum payment at the outset. If you wish, the investor can actually have that 101,000 paid towards the 500,000 that has to be invested for the visa, reducing the investor's capital requirement down to 399,000. There is a loan facility, as I alluded to before, of 50,000, which is how we get to that minimum of 349. And there is a guaranteed exit from year 6 of €500,000. So in its simplest form, you have 399,000 that goes in, and you have 500,000 that comes back out from the 6th year. You can remain invested for as long as you like. There are other incentives to remain invested, but you have that guaranteed exit to trigger from the 6th year to have that 500,000 paid back. It is an investment that is asset-backed during that term as well, so there is a tangible asset held as collateral whilst invested in the fund, which is nice to have. And also another perk of this type of investment is a complimentary stay in Portugal as well. The investors in the fund are allowed to have a complimentary paid trip of 3 weeks per year in Portugal. So that covers your minimum stay. And although you may not realistically want to stay in the same place every year, at least it is there as an option to choose from. So that is an option of a fixed investment. Secondly, an example of a non-fixed investment, a more of a traditional equity-based fund. This one is one with Portugal's largest fund manager, with over €4 billion under management, a track record dating back over 30 years. It is predominantly a technology-based equity fund. It targets over 10% per year and actually has a track record of achieving over 15% per year for the past 10 years. But of course, that is a variable and non-guaranteed return. It can go up as well as down. And the technology industry as a whole, of course, has done very well over the past decade. But one example of something that is, not fixed, it's not guaranteed, but still a good track record to go off. So that's, like I said, there's around 25, 30 funds out there, but these are just to give you an idea of what they look like. And lastly, for those that don't want to invest their own money and wish to simply pay a fee for somebody else to invest and take on the risk for them, you can do so with a financing option, whereas the investor pays €168,000 to the lender, and the lender will provide €500,000 for a term of 7 years, longer if you wish, shorter if desired, and the lender assumes the investment risk instead. And quite simply, the investor has to reassign the ownership of the units that are invested into, so that the 500,000 does go into a qualifying investment fund, but the lender takes ownership of that once you've received your passport, regardless of whether that value has gone up or down. So very much just a financing and walkaway option for 168,000. And if you have capital invested elsewhere that's generating 5 to 10% per year, it can make sense to do a fee, and keep the cash where it is, perhaps. But I will let you decide on that. But those are the 3 categories. Like I said, there are many variations of these, but generally you have fixed investments, non-fixed investments, and then the option of financing. But other than that, that's pretty much everything. Of course, very slightly, I'm going to need to update this picture. That's actually when I had less hair. However, my point being here that good help is, of course, hard to find. And if you have any questions on anything when it gets to the Golden Visa, always be sure to get the facts and the information that you need. And I'll always, of course, be happy to provide the information from here on the ground in Portugal to help you make any informed decisions. Before we move on to the Q&A, a special for the March webinar, I'd like to give everyone the good news that if you just make a note of the code that you see on the screen there, all applications done for the Golden Visa before the 30th of April 2015 will be granted free Portuguese lessons. So you can get up to scratch to a level of Portuguese much better than I can at the moment, as a value of around about 600 euros per person. And like I say, you just need to make sure that you have the code handy, which is PLESSWE5. And that will, yeah, like I say, for the family, it will allow you to have a full Portuguese online tutor during a 12 or 24-week course to pass your A2 Portuguese exam. So yeah, that won't be me on that one. It definitely will not be me doing those lessons, but it will be, of course, a fully qualified tutor. And so yeah, hopefully you've had enough time to write that code down. And yeah, just a little thank you from me for joining tonight's webinar. But other than that, thank you for listening. I hope that was helpful. I've covered literally everything that you need to know about the Portugal Golden Visa in 58 minutes. So thank you very much for joining. We'll now go into some questions, and then yeah, there will be a recording of tonight's webinar that'll be going onto YouTube over the next few days, all being well. But yeah, of course, you have any direct questions for me, you have my email address there on screen. You have the WhatsApp if preferred, or just to make it extra easy, you can scan the QR code that you see right there, and that'll give you access to our calendar to speak on a one-to-one basis with any personal questions that you may have.